Hello, everybody. How are you today? So, once again, it is story time with Teacher Cole. For those who don't know me, I am Teacher Cole. I am the owner and host of Conquering at Homeschooling, which is my Facebook group. And today we are going to read a wonderful story called Loudmouth George and the Big Race. So I'm excited to read this story, and I hope everybody has been able to join us today. So let's start with our story today. So, Loudmouth George and the Big Race by Nancy Carlson. Here we go. For runners everywhere and to fitness for everyone. Look, said Harriet, there's going to be a 2-mile race. I'm going to enter. Me too, said Ralph. How about you, George? Sure, said George. 2 miles will be a breeze for me. I'm going to start training right now, said Harriet. Me too, said Ralph. How about you, George? You guys can train all you like, said George. I'm going to beat you anyway. I'll start my training tomorrow. That night, George went to bed early. He set his alarm clock for 5 o'clock. Professional runners run early in the morning, he said. Ring, 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 ring. But when 5 o'clock came, George just couldn't get up. Smart, professional runners run later, he mumbled, and he went back to sleep. It was noon when George finally came downstairs. Going running, George? Asked his mother. In the midday sun? Said George. Do you want me to get heat stroke? I'll run tonight, when it's cooler. After supper, George got interested in a television show. I can start running tomorrow, he said. In the morning, George saw Harriet jog by. She looks terrible, said George. I'd better go out there and show her how it's done. But when George got downstairs, his mother was making pancakes. I'll wait till after breakfast, said George. After breakfast, George was too full to run. I'm going to really train hard after supper, he said. I may even run 10 miles. That night, after supper, Uncle Chuck stopped by. Who wants to go to the movies with me? He asked. I do, said George. On their way, Harriet passed them. Training for the big race, said Uncle Chuck. I sure am, said Harriet. I can run 1.5 miles now. How about you, George? You bet, said George. And I don't even start my real training until tomorrow. The next day, it rained. The day after that, George had swimming lessons. The day after that, it was too windy to run. The day after that, it was too cold. The day after that, it was too hot. Finally, the day of the big race arrived. "Boy, am I scared," said Harriet. "Not me," said George. "A 2-mile race is nothing for me. Just a walk in the park." The gun fired, bang, and the racers were off. George ran out fast, ahead of everyone. "Just like I thought," he said to himself. "I'm in first place already." After about 2 blocks, George began to feel a little out of breath. First, Harriet passed him, then Ralph. By the end of the first mile, almost everyone had passed him. George felt really tired. Finally, he made it to the finish line. Just in time to see Harriet get her trophy. She took first place. George sat down under a tree to catch his breath. "I've been looking all over for you," said Harriet. "How did you do?" "Uh, not very well," George admitted. "My shoes were too tight." "Don't feel too bad, George," said Harriet. "There's a 3-mile race in 2 weeks. I'm going to start training this afternoon. Want to run with me?" "This afternoon?" George said. "Gee, I don't think so, Harriet. I'm kind of tired." "I'll start training tomorrow." So, this is the end of today's story. I hope you liked it. Talk to your parents and find out, what is the lesson of the story? Can you figure it out? I hope so. So, please join me again next week for another new story with Story Time with Teacher Cole. As always, feel free to join my Facebook group, Conquering at Homeschooling, where we talk about the good times, the struggles, and offer advice when it comes to at home learning, whether it be traditional homeschooling, virtual learning, or maybe you just have a few online classes or tutoring sessions after school. I would also like to remind you that I will be hosting a 3-day free challenge online called 3 Days to Create a Successful at Home Learning Environment. We will be discussing 3 key points in this challenge for 3 days. It will be goals, roles, and solutions. It will be your goals as a family, goals for at home learning, the roles that you play at home when you are teaching or as a parent. Also, your students, we will cover their roles as well. Solutions will be how to put it all together to create an alignment to have a wonderful at home learning experience. Whether this be just after school activities, after school tutoring, traditional at home schooling, or virtual learning as well. Because sometimes we wonder, how are these other parents having such a wonderful and stress free learning environment with their children? What am I not doing to create this environment at my house? So I have decided to host a 3-day challenge to help us all get that great at home learning environment so we can have a stress free and successful school year. I will be putting the link in the comments or later when I trim the video. It'll be linked down below where you are welcome to join at any time or join my Facebook group and see the listing there as well. I look forward to seeing you again soon. I hope you have a wonderful week. Goodbye.